Imagine a young boy finding a grizzly asleep in the forest or a solo fisherman ambushed by a bear. What would you do? These stories show how quickly a peaceful moment can turn dangerous in the wild. From a photographer trapped on a cliff by a polar bear to a camp counselor saving kids from a bear encounter, each tale reveals the raw power of nature's most formidable predators. So join us as we explore 6 unforgettable stories of survival, courage, and unexpected bear encounters. On August 12, 2023, a family from Denver embarked on a long-anticipated camping trip to the Rocky Mountains. For them, this trip was a chance to disconnect from daily routines and immerse themselves in the beauty of the wilderness. The family consisted of David and Lisa, both avid outdoor enthusiasts, and their 7-year-old son Max, who was endlessly curious and excited by nature. The mountains, with their towering pines, rushing streams, and abundant wildlife, seemed like the perfect place for Max to explore and fuel his adventurous spirit. Little did they know, this adventure would test his courage and become a memory they would never forget. As the family set up their campsite, Max's excitement grew. His parents kept a close watch but gave him space to roam near the tent. David, being an experienced camper, made sure to lay down some basic safety rules. He reminded Max to never wander too far, especially in an area where wild animals like deer, elk, and even bears roamed freely. Max listened attentively, nodding, but his adventurous mind drifted to what he might discover among the trees. After lunch, while David and Lisa organized supplies and planned an afternoon hike, Max noticed a narrow trail leading deeper into the forest. Curiosity got the better of him. The promise of finding something unique pulled him forward, and without a second thought, he quietly slipped away from the campsite. The sunlight filtered through the tall trees, casting shadows that danced around him as he moved. The air was cool, filled with pine and damp earth. Each step carried him farther from the familiar sounds of his parents' voices, replaced by the gentle rustling of leaves and the occasional chirping of birds. It wasn't long before Max found himself in a shaded grove surrounded by thick ferns and bushes. As he stepped into the clearing, he froze. Just a few feet ahead of him, lying under the shade of a large pine tree, was an enormous grizzly bear, deep in slumber. Max's eyes widened, a mix of wonder and fear settling over him. He had never seen a bear up close before, and the sight was thrilling and intimidating. His small frame barely moved as he took in the size of the creature before him, the powerful muscles even visible beneath its thick coat. The bear's deep, rhythmic breathing made it seem peaceful, and for a moment, Max felt like he was witnessing something magical. Max's excitement, however, was quickly tempered by his father's voice echoing in his mind. David had once told him that bears were unpredictable, especially when startled. Max knew he had to be careful, so he stepped back, trying not to make a sound. His young heart pounded as he kept his eyes on the bear, inching away as quietly as possible. Each step felt like a delicate dance as he avoided twigs and leaves that could betray his presence. Then, just as he was nearly out of the grove, a small twig cracked under his foot, breaking the silence. The sound was faint, but it seemed loud enough to stir the sleeping bear in the quiet forest. The grizzly's ears twitched, and its eyes flickered open. Max's heart leaped into his throat as the bear lifted its head, turning slightly in his direction. Max stood frozen, barely breathing, as the bear's eyes locked onto him. It was a brief moment, but it felt like an eternity to the young boy. His father's words about staying calm and not provoking wildlife echoed in his mind. Despite his instinct to run, Max knew he had to do something different. Carefully, he lowered himself to the ground, trying to make himself appear small and unthreatening. He remembered hearing that playing dead could sometimes cause a bear to lose interest, so he remained as still as possible. The bear continued to watch him, its powerful body shifting slightly as it sniffed the air, likely catching a whiff of the marshmallow scent lingering on Max's clothes. The bear slowly stepped forward, its heavy paws making little sound on the forest floor. Max's heart pounded as he lay motionless, resisting the urge to look directly at the bear. He knew that making eye contact might provoke it, so he focused on calming himself, slowing his breathing and holding still. After a few tense moments, the bear seemed to lose interest. It snorted, lowered its head, and resumed under the tree. Max felt a surge of relief but knew he wasn't safe yet. Carefully, he inched backward, ensuring each movement was smooth and silent. The bear's breathing became deep and steady again, signaling that it had drifted back to sleep. Max continued his slow retreat until he was far enough away from the grove that he felt comfortable standing up. He took a deep breath, his entire body still tense with the memory of the close encounter. Looking back, he could see the bear's massive form peacefully asleep, as if nothing had happened. The reality of the experience began to sink in, and Max realized how fortunate he was to have escaped unharmed. As he returned to the campsite, he felt a mixture of emotions. He felt pride in staying calm and a newfound respect for the wild. He understood now more than ever why his parents had warned him about wandering off alone. He had seen the power and unpredictability of nature up close, and it had left a lasting impression on him. When Max finally reached the campsite, he found his parents preparing a campfire. They turned to him with relieved smiles, unaware of the encounter he had just survived. Max shared his story, hoping to make them proud of his courage and careful actions. His parents listened intently, their expressions changing from surprise to concern and finally to pride. The experience remained with Max as a valuable lesson in caution and respect for the wilderness. From that day on, he never strayed from his parents in unfamiliar places. He understood the forest's beauty and dangers, forever remembering the silent, powerful presence of the bear that had taught him about survival in the simplest, most profound way. His encounter became a family story, reminding them of the delicate balance between admiration and caution in the natural world. September 15th, 2024, in the remote tundra of northern Canada, a seasoned wildlife photographer named Liam was embarking on the adventure of a lifetime. Having spent years capturing wildlife across the globe, he'd finally made it to one of the world's most untouched and wild landscapes. Liam was determined to capture polar bears in their natural habitat, hoping to document their majestic presence as they roamed the icy cliffs and shores. Armed with his camera and supplies, he ventured out daily, setting up his equipment early, determined to get the perfect shot of these magnificent animals. Liam had chosen a location near a cliff's edge where he knew polar bears often ventured to search for food. Carefully studying their tracks in the snow and their movement patterns, he remained cautious. The bitter cold and the vast open landscape presented unique challenges, but his experience and preparation had always guided him safely. His camp was modest, with a small tent and essentials carefully placed on a flat part of the tundra. The photographer knew he was in polar bear territory, so he took all the necessary precautions, keeping his food sealed and avoiding any scents that might attract the attention of a bear. Liam spotted his subject on the third day of his expedition as the sun rose and painted the white expanse with shades of pink and gold. A massive polar bear, likely a mature male, stood on a cliff some distance away, sniffing the cold morning air. Liam's heart pounded excitedly as he positioned his camera, adjusting the lens to focus on the bear's powerful form against the stark backdrop of ice and rock. He watched through the lens as the bear moved slowly, its enormous paws leaving prints in the snow. Liam snapped one shot after another, feeling a sense of awe at capturing such an iconic creature in its domain. For nearly an hour, he photographed the bear, adjusting his position for different angles and lighting. The creature seemed calm, occasionally looking around before continuing its slow pace along the cliff. But as Liam shifted to get a closer shot, he noticed a change. The bear's gaze locked onto him. At first it appeared merely curious, but then it began to move in his direction, sniffing the air with increasing interest. The realization hit him that the bear was coming closer, perhaps drawn by the scent of his camp or presence. Liam's heart raced as he looked around, assessing his options. He was in an exposed area with little to no cover. The nearest group of rocks offered some elevation, so he quickly approached them, hoping to put some distance between himself and the approaching bear. He scrambled up onto a small, rocky ledge, high enough that it would be difficult for the bear to reach, but not completely out of sight. From his new vantage point, he could see the bear more clearly, and its size up close was staggering. It approached slowly, but then picked up speed as it became more interesting. He watched as the polar bear reached the area where he had been standing moments earlier, sniffing around and examining the scent trail he'd left in the snow. The bear then looked up, catching sight of him on the ledge. Liam felt a shiver run down his spine as he realized he was now the sole focus of the bear's attention. It reared up on its hind legs, towering over him from a distance, a chilling reminder of this animal's power. The polar bear stood on its hind legs, observing Liam with an unwavering gaze. Liam's heart pounded as he tried to remain calm, clinging to the rocky ledge that offered a limited sense of safety. The vast, empty tundra surrounded him, and the silence was broken only by the bear's heavy breaths as it lowered itself back onto all fours. Liam knew he couldn't make any sudden moves. The bear's attention was fully on him, and he didn't want to trigger an aggressive reaction. Time seemed to slow as he kept his eyes on the bear, which began pacing back and forth near the base of the ledge, occasionally lifting its massive head to sniff the air around him. Liam was keenly aware of the bear's size and strength, and the realization that he was alone in this frozen wilderness weighed heavily on him. He knew that any wrong move could draw the bear even closer. His mind raced, thinking of a way to avoid further provoking the animal. Liam stayed still for hours, hoping the bear would eventually lose interest. The cold seeped through his clothes and his muscles ached from maintaining the same tense position. As the bear continued to circle, Liam noticed it occasionally pawing the ground or glancing at him before turning its attention back to the snowy surroundings. He tried to focus on breathing, calming himself as he waited for a chance to escape the bear's attention. Just as exhaustion began to weigh on him, Liam saw movement in the distance. A group of Inuit guides had spotted him on the ledge, recognizing his precarious situation. They quickly assessed the scene, understanding the danger he faced. Armed with experience and knowledge of polar bear behavior, they shouted, waving their arms and using flares to scare the bear away. The sudden noise and bright flashes caught the bear off guard, causing it to hesitate and turn its attention toward the approaching group. Now distracted by the commotion, the bear slowly backed away from the ledge, deciding that the noise and lights were not worth its curiosity. Liam watched it move into the distance, disappearing over the snowy horizon. Relief washed over him, and he carefully climbed down from the ledge, feeling the weight of his ordeal settle over him. The guides approached him, checking to ensure he was unharmed and offering him water as they led him back to safety. As they trekked back, Liam replayed the encounter in his mind. His close call with the bear was a powerful reminder of the wild's unpredictability and the importance of respect for nature's boundaries. The experience left him with a deep sense of humility, knowing that his survival had come down to patience, luck, and the timely arrival of skilled guides. This expedition, intended to capture the beauty of polar bears, had turned into a life-altering event. Liam knew that each photograph he had taken would carry a profound new meaning, a reminder of the narrow line between curiosity and survival in the wild. On a cold February night in 2024, deep in the wilderness of Alaska, a homesteader named Jack found solace in his simple, rugged lifestyle. Living alone had always been a choice for him, a way to escape the outside world's noise and embrace the quiet strength of the forested mountains. His cabin, nestled miles from the nearest town, had been his labor of love, built by his hands over years of hard work. This remote life wasn't for everyone, but Jack took pride in surviving off the land, hunting and foraging to prepare for the long, harsh winters. Jack was a tall, strong man in his mid-50s, his face weathered by the years spent facing Alaska's icy winds and challenging terrain. Over the years, he had learned to live in harmony with the forest, understanding the behaviors of the wildlife around him. Bears, wolves, and moose were common visitors near his cabin, but he kept a respectful distance, knowing the delicate balance of life in the wilderness. His cabin was stocked with enough dried meat, grains, and canned goods to last him through the winter, carefully packed away to keep them safe from any passing creatures. Jack had just fallen asleep on this particular night, exhausted from a day spent chopping firewood and tending to his supplies. The wind howled outside, and the cabin creaked slightly in the cold as the temperature dropped below freezing. The fire in the stove had burned low, leaving only a warm glow in the room, casting shadows over the walls filled with tools and hunting gear. Jack was a light sleeper, his senses always on alert, but tonight he felt an unusual sense of unease as he drifted off, his mind filled with thoughts of spring's arrival and the tasks he would need to complete to prepare for the next season. A sudden loud crash shattered the silence, jolting Jack awake. His heart raced as he tried to make sense of the noise, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. Another loud thud followed, then the splintering sound of wood being ripped apart. Panic surged through him as he realized that the noise was coming from the front of the cabin. Grabbing his rifle from beside his bed, Jack moved cautiously, his heart pounding as he made his way toward the main room. The scent of cured meat filled the air, mingling with the crisp cold seeping through the shattered doorway. As he rounded the corner, Jack froze. Halfway through the broken door, a massive grizzly bear was forced into the cabin, drawn by the smell of food. The bear's fur was matted and wet from the snow outside, and its dark eyes gleamed with a hunger that sent chills down Jack's spine. He knew this wasn't a casual visit. The bear was desperate, likely driven by food scarcity during the harsh winter. Its powerful jaws tore at the wood, and within moments the bear's hulking form was fully inside, filling the small cabin with its terrifying presence. Jack steadied his rifle, knowing he had only seconds to react. He fired a shot, hoping to scare the bear off, but it only seemed to anger the animal. The bear let out a deep guttural roar, its massive body lunging forward, knocking over shelves and sending supplies tumbling to the floor. Jars of preserves shattered, and bags of flour burst open as the bear clawed its way through, destroying everything in its path. The scent of food drove it into a frenzy, and Jack knew he had to act fast to avoid being cornered. As the bear advanced, Jack backed away, his mind racing. Given the animal's sheer size and strength, his chances of fighting off it were slim. Desperation gripped him as he retreated toward the narrow ladder leading up to the attic. A small space barely large enough to hold him, but it was his only hope. Jack scrambled up the ladder, heart pounding as he pulled himself into the cramped attic space. Beneath him, the bear roared, its powerful claws tearing through anything in its path. Jack felt the structure shake under the animal's weight as it moved through the cabin, ripping apart the shelves and pawing through his winter supplies. His hard-earned food stock, carefully stored to last him through the cold months, was scattered across the floor, crushed and ruined. The loss was devastating, but at this moment Jack's only concern was survival. Jack was curled up in the attic and knew he couldn't stay hidden forever. The attic offered no escape, no way to climb down or exit without crossing paths with the bear. He held his breath, straining to hear each sound from below. The bear's growls grew softer, but Jack knew it was still close, sniffing and searching for anything edible. He hoped it would tire of the wreckage and leave, but time dragged on and the bear showed no signs of leaving the cabin. Jack felt the bitter cold seep into his bones as the minutes turned into hours. The cabin's warmth had quickly disappeared without a fire, leaving him shivering in the attic. He reached for his old radio, hoping for a chance at rescue. Fumbling with numb fingers, he managed to turn it on and call for help. His voice, hoarse with fear and exhaustion, echoed into the silence as he explained his dire situation. Each second felt like an eternity as he waited, hoping someone would pick up the signal. The radio crackled to life. A nearby ranger station had received his call and assured him that help was coming. Relief washed over him, but he knew he wasn't safe yet. The bear continued its slow, deliberate exploration of the cabin, driven by its relentless hunger. Jack stayed silent, his body tense and alert, listening to the bear's every movement. Finally, as dawn began to break, he heard the distant sound of snowmobiles approaching. The bear's head lifted, ears pricked at the unfamiliar noise, and it gave a low growl before lumbering toward the door. Armed with flares and loud shouts, the rescuers finally scared the bear away, watching as it vanished into the forest. Only then did Jack dare to climb down, his legs shaking with relief and the residual fear of the night's encounter. The cabin lay in ruins. Broken shelves, spilled supplies, and deep claw marks were scattered throughout. His hard-won food, meant to last the winter, was gone, leaving Jack with barely enough provisions to survive until spring. Though grateful to be alive, Jack felt a profound sense of loss as he looked around at what remained of his home. The peaceful isolation he had cherished had now left him vulnerable in ways he had never anticipated. As the rangers helped him pack up, Jack couldn't shake the lingering sense of awe and respect for the power of the wilderness. His quiet life in the mountains had changed forever, marked by this unforgettable night. The encounter humbled him, a stark reminder of the thin line between solitude and survival in Alaska's unforgiving wilderness. August 15th, 2023 marked the day when the Williams family set out on a highly anticipated summer hiking trip in the Smoky Mountains. The family, made up of Mark, his wife Emily, and their two children, Noah and Lily, loved spending time outdoors, and this particular trail promised breathtaking views and a peaceful escape. Mark, an experienced hiker, had spent weeks planning the route and checking weather conditions, while Emily had packed their essentials, including food, water, and a first aid kit. For Noah, who was 10, and Lily, 7, this adventure was a thrilling journey they'd eagerly awaited. The trail they chose was relatively popular, but as they ventured deeper into the woods, the trees became denser, and the sounds of nature seemed to grow louder. The sun filtered through the leaves, casting a dappled light along the path, and the family took in the sights and sounds of the mountain forest. Lily and Noah pointed out squirrels scurrying across branches and marveled at colorful wildflowers peeking through the foliage. The hike felt almost magical, a quiet retreat from their usual busy life. After an hour of walking, they reached a secluded viewpoint that offered a sweeping view of the valley below. The family stopped to catch their breath, taking in the stunning scenery. Mark decided it was the perfect time for a snack break, and they opened their packs, enjoying the sandwiches and fruit they had packed. The children giggled as they tossed crumbs to a few birds that fluttered nearby, hoping for a treat. It was a peaceful moment, one of those rare times when the world seemed to slow down. However, their peace was short-lived. Just as they were about to resume their hike, a sudden rustling in the bushes caught their attention. From behind a thicket, a black bear emerged, its nose in the air as it sniffed around. The bear, likely drawn by the scent of food, looked directly at them, its dark eyes watching their every move. Mark's heart raced as he quickly realized the seriousness of the situation. Though the bear appeared calm initially, he knew it could change instantly, especially if it felt threatened. Mark whispered to his family to stay quiet and avoid sudden movements. He held out his arms, keeping Emily, Noah, and Lily behind him, hoping the bear would lose interest and move on. But suddenly, the calm was broken as Noah, overcome with fear, released a sharp gasp and stepped backward. The bear reacted immediately, lifting its head and releasing a low, rumbling growl. Mark could sense the tension building as the bear's stance shifted, showing signs of agitation. Realizing they had to act quickly, Mark instructed Emily to slowly take the children and back away. He then grabbed their packs and threw them down the trail, hoping the sight and scent of food would divert the bear's attention. As Mark threw their packs down the trail, the black bear's attention shifted immediately. The scent of food drifting from the bags captured the bear's full focus. It lumbered a few steps toward the packs, nose twitching as it assessed this new, more tempting distraction. Mark held his breath, his mind racing, hoping the bear would follow the bags and move away from his family. His primary concern was ensuring Emily, Noah, and Lily stayed safe. Slowly, Mark gestured for them to keep backing up, ensuring they were putting distance between themselves and the bear. Every movement was deliberate and calm, trying not to draw the bear's attention back to them. The children stayed close to Emily, clinging to her with wide eyes and pale faces. Mark could see the fear in his family's expressions, but he knew they needed to stay composed. He tried to project a calm exterior despite his heart pounding. For a moment, it seemed as if the bear would follow the packs down the trail, but suddenly it paused and glanced back toward the family. Mark's stomach dropped as the bear's dark eyes locked on them again. It let out another low growl, sensing the presence of the humans, even as the food pulled its interest in the opposite direction. Mark realized that it was only a matter of seconds before the bear would choose whether to stay focused on the food or to approach them again. Mark grabbed a handful of rocks in a final, desperate attempt to keep the bear away. He tossed them toward the bear, making sure not to hit it directly, but to startle it enough to make it reconsider. The rocks landed near the bear, causing it to pause. With a loud snort, it seemed to decide that the easier path was toward the bags of food rather than confronting the family. Relieved, Mark watched as the bear ambled down the trail after the packs, losing interest in them at last. As soon as the bear had moved a safe distance away, Mark turned to his family and urged them to pick up their pace, moving quickly but quietly back down the path they had come from. His heart still raced, but the lingering tension tempered his relief. They couldn't afford to let their guard down until they were far from the bear's reach. Mark finally took a deep breath once they had covered a good distance. The family exchanged looks of relief, but the experience had left its mark on each of them. They walked in silence, each lost in thought, replaying the tense moments repeatedly in their minds. Only when they reached a more populated part of the trail did the reality of what they had just faced begin to sink in. Later, they shared their story with park rangers, who explained that the bear had likely become accustomed to human food left behind by other visitors. This experience left the family with a newfound respect for wildlife and the importance of following safety guidelines. For Mark, Emily, and their children, this trip to the mountains became more than just a summer hike. It was a vivid reminder of nature's unpredictability and the need to remain vigilant, respectful, and cautious in wild spaces. On July 14, 2023, a group of eager young campers set out on an adventurous hike near a national park in Sierra Nevada, led by their enthusiastic counselor, Tom. Tom had been working as a counselor for several years and was known for his knack for making nature both fun and educational for the kids. This group of campers, mostly between the ages of 8 and 10, had been looking forward to exploring the woods. They had heard stories about the beautiful trails, unique wildlife, and breathtaking views, and they could barely contain their excitement as they made their way along the well-trodden path. Tom watched the group as they hiked, ensuring no one strayed too far or got lost in their surroundings. The campers stopped every few minutes to examine interesting rocks or point out small animals. Tom's backpack was filled with supplies from snacks to a whistle and even a first aid kit just in emergencies. The group moved leisurely, laughing and chatting, unaware of the silent, looming presence that watched from the forest's edge. Tom heard a faint rustling sound as they rounded a bend on the trail. He dismissed it at first, thinking it might just be the wind or a small animal. But then, out of his eye, he noticed movement in the dense undergrowth. Stepping forward to get a better look, his heart sank as a massive black bear slowly emerged from the trees, its dark eyes fixed on the group. The bear's large frame and steady gaze sent a chill down his spine. It was clear the bear wasn't in a hurry to leave. Instead, it seemed curious, maybe even slightly irritated by the noise of the campers. Tom's mind raced as he thought of what to do. He knew that bears were unpredictable, especially when threatened or cornered. With the children so close, he couldn't risk any sudden movements. Acting quickly, Tom motioned for the kids to follow him behind a large boulder nearby. He whispered for them to crouch low and stay quiet, explaining that they needed to be as still as possible. The children, sensing the seriousness in his tone, complied, their earlier excitement replaced with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Tom's heart was pounding, but he forced himself to stay calm for the sake of the children. He knew that he would have to act carefully to keep everyone safe. The bear, meanwhile, took a few steps closer, sniffing the air as if trying to assess the group's presence. Tom realized he had to divert its attention. Reaching into his backpack, he grabbed a few items he thought might help scare the animal away. Tom took a deep breath, steadying his nerves. The campers crouched low, clutching each other in silence, their eyes wide with fear and wonder as they watched him carefully. Tom knew he had to act quickly to keep the bear's attention away from the children hiding behind the boulder. He reached into his backpack, pulling out his whistle, a metal water bottle, and a small cooking pot, items that he hoped would be enough to distract the animal. He stood up slowly, making sure to stay calm. The bear was still watching him intently, its large frame only a short distance away. Tom started by blowing the whistle sharply, the high-pitched sound cutting through the quiet forest. The bear paused, tilting its head slightly as if curious about the sudden noise. Next, Tom began banging the metal pot against the water bottle, creating a loud, echoing clatter that startled the animal. The campers held their breath, peering around the boulder to see what would happen next. For a moment, it seemed like the bear might retreat. It took a few steps backward, appearing uncertain about the loud sounds and the unfamiliar actions of the figure in front of it, but then, as if reconsidering, it advanced again, sniffing the air and pawing the ground, still drawn to the area by the faint scent of food. Tom's heart pounded, but he maintained his focus, trying not to show any signs of fear. He knew he had one last option. Reaching into his backpack, he pulled out the small flare he always carried for emergencies. He had been saving it for a situation exactly like this. He ignited the flare with one final steady movement, and a bright flash of red light filled the clearing. The sudden burst of light and the sharp sizzling sound startled the bear. It hesitated, momentarily distracted by the brightness and the unusual noise. Sensing its uncertainty, Tom waved the flare slowly, directing it away from the campers and towards the opposite side of the trail. After a tense pause, the bear finally turned and loped down the hill, disappearing into the dense forest. Tom sighed in relief, lowering the flare as he turned back to the children. They emerged slowly from behind the boulder, their expressions a mix of awe and gratitude. Tom guided them back along the trail, maintaining a calm and steady pace until they reached the safety of the main camp. The campers gathered around him as they recounted the events to others, and Tom was hailed for his quick thinking and bravery. This encounter left everyone with a new respect for the wilderness and the importance of caution. Tom knew his actions had saved the day, and his story became a lasting lesson in courage and preparedness for all who heard it. In July 2024, on the serene banks of Alaska's Kenai Peninsula, Jack, an experienced fisherman, carefully prepared his gear for a day of salmon fishing. He had been coming to this remote area for years, valuing the quiet solitude and the plentiful fish that filled the cold waters. Jack knew the dangers of Alaska's wilderness well. He'd seen moose and even wolves during his past trips, always keeping his distance. His calm demeanor and respect for nature had kept him safe on these solo journeys. But this day would test his limits in a way he hadn't imagined. Focused intently on his line, Jack moved slowly along the riverbank, scanning the water for signs of movement. He cast his line, watching it arc through the air before landing in the flowing stream. The tranquil sound of rushing water surrounded him, drowning out any other noise from the nearby woods. He was so engrossed in his task that he didn't notice the subtle rustling in the bushes a few yards behind him. At that moment, a large brown bear emerged from the thick foliage, its massive figure blending into the shadowy trees. It moved slowly, aware of Jack, but cautious. This bear had likely hidden a stash of fish or food nearby and was defensive, sensing Jack's presence as a potential threat. Jack was completely unaware of the bear's approach. His mind was occupied with the gentle tug on his line as he waited for the salmon to bite. The bear charged without warning. Its powerful paws pounded the earth as it closed the gap between them in seconds. Jack only became aware of the danger when he heard the sound of snapping branches and a deep growl that seemed to shake the ground itself. He turned just in time to see the bear lunging toward him, a blur of fur and muscle. Instinct kicked in, and he tried to back away, but the bear was already upon him, knocking him off balance and sending him tumbling into the freezing water of the river. The cold river hit him like a shock, making him gasp as he struggled to stay afloat. The current was stronger than anticipated, pulling him downstream as he tried to regain his footing. The bear was relentless, pacing along the bank, watching him with sharp eyes that didn't waver. Jack knew he couldn't stay in the water for long. The icy temperature was draining his strength, making it harder to keep his head above the surface. Desperately looking around for any kind of cover, Jack spotted a large fallen log partially submerged in the river, just a few yards downstream. He kicked against the current, the cold numbing his legs, and finally reached the log. With every ounce of strength left in him, he pulled himself behind it, using the thick wood as a barrier between himself and the bear. The bear prowled along the riverbank, still intent on guarding its territory. Jack held his breath, his heart pounding as he clung to the rough bark of the log. Jack clung tightly to the rough log, his fingers numb from the freezing water. Every muscle felt tense as he kept his eyes on the bear on the riverbank, pacing back and forth with slow, deliberate steps. The bear's gaze was fixed on where Jack had fallen, its intense stare showing no sign of backing down. Jack understood that the bear would not leave easily. It was still on guard, protecting what it believed to be its territory. His heart pounded, and he felt each beat echo through his entire body as he stayed as still as possible, hoping the bear would lose interest. The cold water sapped his energy, and Jack could feel his strength fading. The minutes seemed like hours as he tried to remain calm and conserve his little energy. The log provided some protection, but Jack knew he couldn't stay there forever. The biting chill of the river began to penetrate through his layers of clothing, numbing his arms and legs and making it harder to hold on. He had to stay alert. Even the slightest movement might draw the bear's attention again. Finally, after an eternity, the bear seemed to lose interest. It sniffed the air, glanced at the log, then turned and lumbered back into the thick forest. Jack watched closely, barely daring to breathe until he could no longer see the bear's form among the trees. He waited a few more moments to be certain, before carefully pulling himself up from the log, his limbs stiff and heavy from the cold. The shore felt like a distant goal, but he knew he needed to escape the water quickly. As he struggled back to the bank, the weight of what had happened began to sink in. He had come so close to becoming another story of wilderness danger, a warning for others who ventured too close to bear territory. The river and the forest, so quiet now, seemed to close in around him, a reminder of the unpredictable power of nature. Once on the shore, Jack sat momentarily, catching his breath. His body shook from the cold, and he wrapped his arms around himself to regain warmth. Soon he heard voices from the river. A group of kayakers appeared, their faces concerned when they noticed his worn expression and damp clothes. They helped him onto one of the kayaks and offered him a blanket, their presence a relief after the hours he had spent facing nature alone. Later, as they brought him to safety, Jack reflected on the encounter. His respect for the wilderness deepened, and he understood the need for caution, even for those with experience. It was a lesson in survival he would never forget, a humbling reminder of the boundaries between humans and the wild, and a tale he would carry with him always.